There's been a lot of discussion and a lot of noise about our president deporting criminal illegal aliens to El Salvador. A lot has been made about this. Is it legal? Is it moral? Is it a matter of national security? Now, listen, I think it is, but I'm not an expert. I want to dig into this with an actual expert so that you all at home can understand what's going on here and you can tell your friends. So joining me now is the expert, criminal justice advocate, and former gang attorney, John Koufos. John, thank you so much for enlightening us all about this. Now, there's this specific case about this, quote, Maryland father that was, I guess, accidentally sent to El Salvador. There's a lot of misinformation around exactly what happened there, the administrative error. But then the broader thing is, does President Trump, as president of the United States, have the authority and the ability to deport criminal illegal aliens to an El Salvadoran prison? I want you to break this down so that average folks out there without a law degree can understand the dynamics here.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. So first of all, yes, the president has the authority to do it, right? And this goes way back to the days of the Patriot Act, right? When the Patriot Act was passed, one of the downstream effects was changes and dramatic changes to the immigration law, right? So if you're accused of being part of a terrorist organization, which cartels, gang members, Tren de Aragua, MS-13, all have been designated by executive order, and I think rightly so, you're now subject to different deportation rules than before, right? So as a threshold matter, the authority, and you can look up the law, it's 8 U.S.C. 1182 if anybody's that interested in looking it up. Now, by the way, this is not something of recent vintage, right? Since even 2008, 2009, TDA and its origins, MS-13. I mean, there's been paper after paper after paper from the FBI, from the DEA, from Interpol, talking about human trafficking, drug trafficking, firearms, and outright violence to enforce, right? Think of these gangs less as the producers of narcotics, right? Think of more of the distribution channel, right? They're not the factory, but they're one of the Amazon delivery drivers. We want to think about it like that. But the problem is to protect their routes, they do it. They rule with an iron fist. So now let's talk about the administrative error itself, right? I should use quotes on that. So the error was, should his butt have been in the seat to El Salvador? Right? That is the error. And the error is not, should this person have been taken into custody or should this person have been deported? Now, I say that because he wasn't on the first list. That doesn't mean he wasn't on the list, right? It just means he wasn't on the first 220 or 230 seats. So this administrative error is really a misnomer. It's not really an administrative error. That's where we are on this.
So I want to go and I want to clarify and reiterate that because I think it's really important for my audience to understand this, because depending on which news channel you watch, if you're watching some of the liberal news channels, they would have you believe that this Maryland father, this guy was just out playing ball with his kids and ICE just came and swooped him up and put him on a plane and sent him to El Salvador. They would have you believe that he was just maybe undocumented, but not a gang member, not a proven gang member. Maybe he had some colorful tattoos, but he was misidentified. So please clarify for my audience this case, and if he was actually rightfully removed, whether there was an error on the flight or where he went. Clarify that so my audience can understand with certainty.
Certainly. So the Prince George County, Maryland Police Department had documented this individual as a gang member some time ago. Right. So this goes back some period of time, had nothing to do with the Trump administration or the feds at all. It was PG County, Prince George County, that designated this individual. So he gets designated. He goes before an immigration judge way back when, who gives him temporary status to be here. That status never gets protected. But the thing is, he never stops being a member of a gang. There's no evidence that he renounced his membership in the gang. There's a whole process to renunciate these sorts of things. None of that stuff happened, right? So maybe on that particular day he wasn't involved in gang activity, but the government has no information other than the fact that PG County says he's a gang member, right? He has physical indications through the tattoos consistent with gang membership, and there's no renunciation. So when he arrives at ICE, when ICE arrives with him, Here's a guy that is not renounced. He's not on record not being a gang member. So
and
what happens
is
is
an illegal alien who I believe entered in like 2011.
Yes, he's been here a long time, never perfected his status. And then when you add all this up, and again, going back to the Patriot Act, so like people who are really mad should go be mad at George W. Bush, who signed the Patriot Act and the senators back then, right? Like that is what created the ability to deport in this fashion. And we did it in response to 9/11, right? So now you have this individual, either way, they're going to jail. They're going to jail either here, somewhere in America, or they're on their way to being deported somewhere else. So now there's X number of seats on the plane to El Salvador, right? The president has authority to remove people who are tied to foreign terrorist activities from the country, right? How many times were people removed during the Patriot Act right after 9/11, right? They were taken to black sites all over the world, right? They were taken to Guantanamo Bay. They were taken to all other places and no one could find them. Here we know where they are. They're going to El Salvador. So the plane manifest has 220, at least from the court filings I read, 230 seats. Some people are removed from those seats. Some people are not. This individual gets put on the plane. He's out there. And now the question is, can we get him back? We're being told to get him back. I don't think the American courts have authority over the El Salvadorian government or the El Salvadorian prison. And even if he comes back, he's going to a 23-1 lockdown here in America anyway.
So what is the deal, though, with the quote, administrative error? So he was supposed to be on the flight. He wasn't supposed to be on the flight. Would he be subject to go to El Salvador, or was he supposed to be sent somewhere else? I also heard some rumblings that maybe he had told a judge that if I go back to my country, there are going to be retaliatory gang actions against me, so don't send me there. What is the deal with all of that? Because there's so much information out there, and it's really hard to separate fact from fiction in this case.
Yes, he was able to be put on the flight. The administrative error was that he wasn't on the first 200. He wasn't the first guy on the flight. So think of him on a wait list, right? So if you have 220 seats on a plane, they had 220, 230 seats on this plane. All were filled, right? This gentleman from Maryland was not on that 220. But then different things happen, right? Other people are deported from other ways and people move up the list. That's the universe of the administrative error. The administrative error isn't the government conceding this person wasn't a gang member because he was. It wasn't them conceding he was here legally because he wasn't. Now, with respect to saying, yes, if you send me back to my country of origin, I'm subject to persecution. The problem we have here is that everybody says that. Look, everybody says that, so we have no way to know if, in fact, that's true or not. So we have to rely on the El Salvadorian prison, if that is true, to, like every prison in America, will sequester you in one place until they classify you to general population. And if you're going to be harmed in general population, you sit in a different unit, right? I mean, that's what the whole point of classification units in prisons are. And we have no reason to believe El Salvador doesn't have that.
It's just so weird here, the way that this has been just twisted and bent like a pretzel. Because from what you're telling me, it's like, okay, they didn't have him on the original flight manifest. It's like you get delayed and, Delta bumps you to the next flight, but then, you get standby on the first. But the way that they are making this seem is he must be brought back because he was unfairly removed, that he shouldn't have been on the way to El Salvador because he was, just this happy-go-lucky guy that got swept up in a mistake. That really is the way that it's being classified and the way that it's being, disseminated to the American people.
Well, it's incorrect because here's what would have happened. So say the flight was full, right? He goes to an ICE detention center and he sits there and he's deported anyway. And then there's no reason to believe he wouldn't be deported to El Salvador or Venezuela or one of these other places anyway. So the only difference is he would have been in America first and then deported as opposed to deported right away. But I think we need to think about this, really logically from a public safety perspective. If this keeps happening and the individuals are being ordered to be brought back, we're putting people who are part of documented foreign terrorist organizations back in the prison or back in, the ICE detention center where American guards and officers are working. Why would we ever want to do that and create additional issues inside our detention centers and jails for our officers? I can't understand that.
It's wild that now they're saying, bring him back. They're saying you got to find him and you've got to bring him back. We don't know if that's possible, but if they do bring him back, he's just gonna, what are they just gonna give him? There's a lot also that's been said about him not getting due process. Can you elaborate on that? Personally, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm just an American, I don't really give a rat's ass if illegal alien gang members get their day in court. That's me. But there's been a lot made of this, like you have to give him due process. Elaborate on that for my audience.
Sure. So yes, he is entitled to a level of due process, but there's no indication he didn't get that right now. So the level of due process you get, again, when you're a documented member of a gang, which is now a foreign terrorist organization, and you're here illegally, is far, far lower than what we all see on Law and Order, where someone is arrested and they're presented for indictment to the grand jury, and they get court appearances and status conferences and trials. That's not the way it worked. The burden of proof is not reasonable doubt either, like it is in an American court. It's probable cause, reasonable suspicion. It's a much lower civil type of standard. So there's the universe of due process, even thinking as liberal as you'd want to think about this for a second, would be what additional information do we have that the person's a gang member? Well, we have a documented law enforcement agency saying they are. That's good in American courts. Go ask any American who's locked up right now for being part of a criminal conspiracy when a CI says they're a gang member and the jury finds beyond a reasonable doubt that they're a gang member. Right. So this happens to American people locked up all the time right now. He certainly wouldn't be the gentleman, the Maryland gentleman certainly wouldn't be entitled to a higher level of due process than that. So if he's given the same amount of due process, his gang status stays and he's subject to now these post-Patriot Act deportation procedures.
Let's say they get him back. Is there any chance that this fella walks free? Is there any chance that this man just goes back into the community?
I can't imagine unless there's some renunciation on file somewhere. But the administration obviously would have produced that, or the defense team would have produced that, or we'd have an affidavit from the guy saying he had renounced at some point. But no, the procedure is, even if he comes back, he'll be brought back. Probably he'll be put in a 23-1 type environment now because he's on the foreign terrorist organization list, right, in the detention center. He'll sit there pending an immigration court review. The government will present the same information it has, and the immigration court will have to decide. But no, there's very little chance, unless there's evidence that none of us know about right now. There's very little evidence this person goes out into the community, unless they become like an informant for the government or something like that, which happens, that part does happen.
I mean, at the end of the day, he's still an illegal alien. So he could be deported. That's my understanding. You're an illegal alien, like you are subject to removal.
That's correct. That's correct.
My mind is blown.
I think the issue people have with this one is that I think that, there's a certain political persuasion in America that was looking for what they call in law the perfect plaintiff, right? And obviously none of these folks are perfect plaintiffs. They picked the guy who was closest to it, which is this guy. And unfortunately, if he comes back, he's going to be not deported right back out anyway, unless he has some great piece of information for American law enforcement that would make it worth the Department of Justice letting him stay.
I think that these judges that are trying to block this and want him to come back, I think while he's awaiting his due process, maybe he should stay at their house. Maybe they should put him up. Room and board. This guy is such a great man. He's a pillar of the community. He should stay at your house. Let's see how that goes. I mean, this is wild to me. But beyond this just one case, we know that this is going to end up going to the Supreme Court of whether the president has the authority. To most people, it's like, yes, the president has the authority. And one district court judge can't say that the president can't carry out his duties as the commander-in-chief, as the president of the United States. But how is this going to play out in the interim before this goes to the Supreme Court? We hope it goes, and we hope we get a decision quick. But there's a lot of time between when that's going to happen. So is the president essentially now, with these judges, these, I would say, activist judges, is he at a standstill to remove people under the Alien Enemies Act at this point?
Well, I think this is good. Well, the answer is no. It's also a be careful what you wish for type thing. So what's going to happen? So here's how operationally we work out. Say a series of district court judges all put restraining orders and injunctions on the federal government to do these things, right? If that were to occur, what would then happen? These folks would then just all be detained here pending the outcome of the Supreme Court case, and then they'd be sent out at the conclusion of that. Because I can't imagine the Supreme Court ruling that the current immigration law does not permit deportation of these individuals.
So then we would just pay for them. Like, I've never, the Democrats right now that are dying on this hill of like, bring this guy back is unfathomable to me. But, nothing surprises me anymore. From your perspective and your career in this process of not only securing the border, I think last week they had like 9 gotaways, and compared to hundreds, if not thousands, it's like we had 9 and like 8 of them is because of medical, right? It's astonishing to me the speed with which this administration is working to protect our nation. But when you look at the numbers of criminal aliens and gang members and stuff that are being deported, sent to El Salvador, when you look at this from your expert perspective, would you say that the administration is doing a good job at this?
Oh, an amazing job. I mean, the only people who are annoyed at this are probably my old colleagues in the criminal defense bar, since I don't practice any longer, right? Those guys, because there's a whole bunch of clients they can't have anymore, right? Because they're all sent out of the country. But when we're talking about the ability to not only remove the people who are public safety threats that shouldn't be here, but candidly create a deterrent effect so new people do not come over the border. I mean, that is as effective as it gets, right? I mean, you can't do any better than no one coming over, right? I mean, so that gives us a chance to sort of diagnose and treat the issue in the country, which is significant. And by the way, like, nobody, including President Trump, and I had the pleasure of working with him on a lot of public safety issues, on the First Step Act, et cetera. Like, nobody's saying we shouldn't have robust legal immigration. Nobody's saying that. But what everyone's saying, and even Democrats used to say this, go back to old Bill Clinton speeches, right? People used to say that we need a logical immigration system with the first goal is to protect America, and the second goal is everything else. And somehow the first goal became everything else.
Everything and everyone. You brought up maybe your old colleagues that are upset that maybe they don't have the clientele that they once had with all these people. So in that world, when you've got these illegal aliens that are gang members or not that need representation, who pays for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, in my old career, I was privately paid. So, I represented everybody that you would love to talk about on your show, right? So that was my old career. Again, I was from New Jersey. There's plenty of gangs and organized crime to go around for everybody. But who's paying for it now? I think NGOs, legal aid organizations that are being stood up by, a variety of donors are the ones that I understand taking this fight on, because the big cartel guys all have private counsel, and the mid-level guys either don't have enough money to get a paid lawyer, or they feel it actually makes more sense now to go on the social justice with the social justice movement law firm apparatus that's being propped up in a number of places in this country right now.
Yeah, something tells me the taxpayer is paying for a lot of legal advice and counsel for people who have no right to be here. Last thing I want to ask you about is kind of on the same page, but slightly different. This whole Mahmoud Khalil business. Currently being held, again, another ICE detention situation. He said he was abducted. He's a 30-year-old living on a campus and stirring up anti-Jew, anti-Israel, global Antifada propaganda, terrorizing people on these campuses. But he feels that he's a political prisoner. He's currently being held. A lot of people think that, he needs to be returned and that he shouldn't have his visa revoked. And there's a lot of others that are at risk of losing their student visas because they've been, part of some nefarious activities on college campuses. What's the legal perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a threshold matter, right? The fact that this administration isn't tolerating hate speech and lunacy any longer on American campuses doesn't mean you're abducted or your rights are being violated. I think that's a threshold point here. People got away with an awful lot for the last 4 years that completely disrupted the educational environment. The educational environment is federally funded, and the visas are a privilege. They're not a right. No one has a right to a visa in America, and I have no right to a visa in any other country in this globe either, right? So these are a privilege, and the privilege is being revoked if you do those sorts of things. So Khalil has a different but interesting situation because at least his touches on some semblance of free speech. So to me, that's a more interesting case than the open and shut kind of public safety cases we were talking about before.
Yeah, what would happen to me, John, if I went over to, let's just say, let's pick a place. No, let's pick Iraq. I go to Iraq because I want to study there. I'm an American and I want to go to an Iraqi university. And I went over to an Iraqi university and I started talking about overthrowing their government. And I started talking about exterminating Muslims. Or I started talking about some crazy, whatever my radical notion was that their country and their people were the problem, or another country or another religion. I wanted to just get rid of them. And I was talking about, hailing a terror attack on their people or, a certain nationality. What would happen to me? Do you think that the Iraqi government would say, no, they need to be able to stay? Just question.
Well, I'm going to do you one better so that way you have more applicability, my friend. So remove Iraq, go Ireland or Great Britain. If you decide to do that in Ireland or Great Britain, first you'd be locked up and you'd get to do time in an Irish or a Great Britain prison. And then after that, you'd be deported, right? That's what would happen to you in Ireland or Great Britain. So in Iraq, you wouldn't live to tell the tale.
I don't think I would have a head. So
yeah, in Iraq, you would not live to tell the tale in Iraq.
These other countries that, that just hate us, right? They don't give one crap about America, American citizens, our due process. But then for some reason in this country, a certain political persuasion thinks that they want to take on the fight for the world's trash. And it's just remarkable to me. But I appreciate you being here, John, to lay this out, because whether people want the gang members here or they don't, at least they need to know the real story about what's happening here. And I think it really dispels a lot of the narrative. So I really appreciate you breaking it down in simple terms for us to understand. The fight will continue. Thank you so much for your expertise, and please come back.
My pleasure.
I'm sure this is going to continue on, John, so I'm going to lean on your expertise probably down the road. Thank you for being here.
Anytime.
Folks, that does it for this very special and hopefully very informative episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Please show your friends that are getting this story completely and way wrong. Show this to your friends who want criminal illegal aliens in your backyard. Please show them that interview. It's very important for educational purposes and maybe moral ones too. That does it for us today. Please remember to come back Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can also watch us on Fox Nation, of course, outkick.com, foxnews.com, YouTube at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. That is it for me from Nashville. God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.